The rapidly intensifying situation in Ukraine has sparked worry across the globe. Governments have been advising their citizens in Ukraine to remain calm. The latest advisory has been issued by the Indian Foreign Ministry. All Indian nationals have been asked to not move to any of the border posts without prior coordination with the Government of India officials. The statement also says that the situation at many checkpoints is extremely sensitive, because of which the Indian government is working closely with its neighboring countries Poland, Slovakia and Romania. And satellite images show vehicles queuing up near Serbia border crossing to Romania. Dozens of vehicles have formed a 4-mile-long line, that is a 6.5-kilometer queue at Ukraine's border with Romania. Cars and trucks lined the road towards the Serbia border crossing. Satellite images have been released by Maxa Technologies. These images come as thousands of Ukrainians flee to neighboring countries as Russia continues to invade Ukraine. Once again, letting you know, satellite images have now shown that vehicles are queuing up near a border crossing to Romania. Dozens of vehicles have formed a 6.5-kilometer queue at Ukraine's border with Romania. You can see the visuals on your screens right now. Cars and trucks have lined the roads towards the border crossing. Satellite images have been released by Maxa Technologies. You can see them on your screens right now. These images come as thousands of Ukrainians flee to neighboring countries as Russia continues to invade Ukraine. And for more on this, Michael Baker, former CIA Covert Operations Officer, is joining us live from Idaho, United States. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. Ukraine is under attack. A Ukrainian army in a statement has said that Russian attack on the main Kyiv Avenue has been repulsed. What do you make of the situation on ground currently? We also showed the satellite images of cars lining up the roads here near the border with Romania.
Yeah, the refugee situation, the crowds trying to flee to safety, that was certainly anticipated, but it's never easy to manage. So, sort of the necessary chaos of it all is again, not a surprise. But the Russian forces, the ground forces and the support elements that the Russians, that Putin had amassed on the border with Ukraine, they've moved about half of those into Ukraine at this point. And it does appear as if they're moving slower. They're meeting more resistance than it's likely that Putin anticipated and wanted. Look, his goal here was to do this very quickly, to avoid, not to make this sound odd, but to avoid the public relations nightmare, right? The visuals of a difficult battle with the Ukrainian military and certainly with the population. So it appears as if the resistance is stronger than was anticipated. That's slowing them down. That allows the Ukrainian military to respond a little more effectively as they anticipate the next moves from these various elements that are coming in from different directions.
Right.
So I think it doesn't mean that the Russian military is going to be defeated by any means. They're overwhelmingly stronger in numbers. But what we have to hope for is that they face a painful fight and Putin suffers for what he's done here.
All right. And now, Russia had earlier called this denazification of Ukraine. Now, do you see this as part of Russia waging an information war? And what do you think is the main objective here?
Well, look, it's definitely a disinformation campaign. The Russians are very good at sort of that covert action campaign of spreading disinformation, of trying to impact public opinion. But that's nonsense. Look, what this whole thing is about, it's a false narrative that Russia puts out there, that Putin puts out there, that he was so concerned about the Ukraine and NATO because it was a threat to Russian security. Nobody in their right mind believes that NATO or Ukraine posed a threat to Russia and to the Russian population. What this is about is Putin trying to maintain his power. The only threat that the democracy, a successful democracy on Russia's border presents is a threat to Putin's hold on power. That's it. So there was no threat to the Russian population or to the sovereignty of the Russian nation. That's just, it's all about Putin trying to maintain control. And that's it. And so, we have to be pragmatic and realistic about, sort of the base reason why Putin is doing this.
Right, and the United Nations too has stepped up humanitarian aid for Ukraine. How do you assess the humanitarian and the financial cost of this war?
Well, it's going to be enormous. I mean, obviously the building refugee situation already is going to be very costly. It appears as if Congress in the U.S. has been asked by the administration to provide, upwards of $5-6 billion more in assistance to the Ukraine government and military. So, the cost of this will keep escalating. What we have to hope for is the costs are infinitely more on Putin's side. But again, I'm not particularly optimistic about anything that the UN does. Look, the bizarreness of Russia being in charge this month of the Security Council and vetoing a move by the Security Council to end the war is. You can't write that for TV or film. It's as bizarre as it gets. It's like abstaining. I mean, China abstaining from that vote was anticipated. That's what they do. But it would have been nice to imagine that all members of that Security Council, aside from Russia and China, would have said, "Yeah, let's put an end to this, and we condemn it."
Right. Michael, do stay with us. We will come back to you. Just news coming in. Ukraine says that 2 commercial ships have been hit by Russian missiles near the Odessa port. And also some other news coming in from the Ukrainian capital city. The army claims that they had repulsed a Russian attack in the main Kyiv Avenue. The Victory Avenue is the western part of the city where authorities claim that Russia targeted an army base. Now, earlier reports suggested that artillery rounds and intense gunfire were heard in this region. In a separate operation, local agency claims that Russian troops were trying to capture one of the city's electricity generating stations. This comes just hours after President Volodymyr Zelensky warned that Russian troops will storm the capital city before dawn.
Ця ніч буде більш тяжкою, ніж день. Під ударом багато міст нашої держави. Чернігів, Суми, Харків, наші хлопці, наші дівчата на Донбасі, міста півдня України, особлива увага Києву. Не можна втратити столицю. Звертаюсь до наших захисників і захисниць на усіх фронтах цієї ночі. Ворог застосує усі наявні у них сили, щоб зламати наш опір. Підло, жорстко і не по-людськи. Цієї ночі вони підуть на штурм. Всі ми маємо розуміти, що нас чекає. Цієї ночі маємо вистояти.
Currently, Ukrainian troops are defending their positions on all 4 fronts of the city despite being heavily outnumbered here. Kyiv right now is divided between 2 sets of people, one who've packed their bags fleeing towards the western fear, most of them being children, women and the elderly, and the other who have taken up arms to defend their city. Some 18,000 guns with ammunition have been distributed in the Kyiv region alone. People have also been told to make Molotov cocktails, petrol bombs. The country has banned all male citizens from 18 to 60 years old to leave the country. Late night, President Zelensky, along with other top government officials, were out on the streets. They vowed to defend Ukraine's independence. Let's listen in.
Всім добрий вечір. Лідер фракції тут, голова Офісу президента тут, прем'єр-міністр Шмигаль тут, Подоляк тут, президент тут. Всі ми тут, наші військові тут, громадяни суспільства тут, всі ми тут. Захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. І так буде й далі. Слава нашим захисникам, слава нашим захисницям. Слава Україні!
The Russian invasion has robbed all forms of normalcy in Kyiv. The once prized vibrant European capital has been left with chilling silence. The eerie silence is broken with random sirens, clamor of shelling. The visuals on your screen are from a Catholic church in the capital, which was turned into a shelter house for 27 children and their mothers.
Трошки цього мені треба. Трошки слава Ісусу Христу. Слава Ісусу Христу. Трошки цього. Чуть-чуть.
After weeks of warnings from Western leaders, Russian President Vladimir Putin unleashed a three-pronged invasion of Ukraine. The north, east and south came under heavy attack by ground, air and naval military operations. The invasion has threatened to upend Europe's post-Cold War order. Once again, going back to Michael Baker, former CIA covert operations officer. Now, let's just get into the details here. How do you assess President Vladimir Zelensky's warning that Russian troops will storm the capital city before dawn?
As early as dawn, just based on the positioning and the resistance they've met so far. But it is, in a sense, inevitable. And whether it takes place in the next 24 hours or the next 48 hours, it's certainly anticipated at this point. Again, it's a numbers game at this stage, and then it becomes an issue of urban combat and to what degree can the Ukrainian military and the citizenry maintain an insurgency, right? And that's a very difficult thing. But it is probably the one thing that Putin is really concerned about at this stage. I think he's strategically overreached here anyway, but if this moves on to weeks and weeks and weeks of urban warfare, not just in Kyiv, but in Kharkiv and elsewhere, that won't end well for Putin.
Right. Also, let's just talk about Kyiv's strategy here. About 18,000 guns have been distributed in the Kyiv region alone. Citizens have been asked to help defend their capital. How effective do you think the strategy is going to be, even if it just slows down the Russian troops?
Well, honestly, at this point, every Russian soldier that is taken out by the Ukrainian citizens or by the Ukrainian military elements that are operating, every tank that is destroyed, every Russian aircraft that's shot down has a significant impact, right? Because, information flows differently than it did 20 years ago, right? And so now everyone has a smartphone, and these images will get out. No matter how much Putin tries to shut down social media and information within Russia, those images will get out. And the more that happens, the more of a problem Putin has and should have for what he's done.
Absolutely. Now also let's just talk about the role of the West here. What can the West do in the meantime? Yesterday we saw another raft of sanctions from the West. As you know, this has done little to deter Russia. Now some experts believe that these sanctions are not going to have a crippling effect on Russia at all and its economy. What is your assessment here?
Yeah, I think that President Biden was honest when he said we have to wait and see. And some the sanctions that have been laid on in the past couple of days, yes, it's going to take weeks for them to start to be able to assess the impact on the Russian economy. So I think without the most serious of sanctions, without going straight after removing Russia from the SWIFT financial system, without crippling their oil and gas industry, right? Then I think it's going to have a limiting impact. Those are the things: the SWIFT system, the oil and gas industry for Russia. If you hit those hard, that has an almost immediate impact on Putin, which is why he declared years ago that back in 2014 that if the West took Russia off the SWIFT system, Russia would consider that an act of war. That's because that's how serious that could be, how crippling that could be to their economy. But that's what we have to do. And now, yes, that would cause pain to members of the EU. Because of their inability then to deal with the energy in the short term energy crisis, but we've got to stand for something, and so people are going to have to wear some pain on this.
All right, and in the hours and days to come, how do you see the situation unfolding? What more can the West and the United States do to aid Ukraine?
Well, I think part of it's going to be on two tracks, right? We need to be able to provide more material, if possible, to the Ukrainian military. And that's a typical thing now that the invasion's underway, right? It limits our ability to move hardware into the country. but we have to try to the degree possible, both the U.S. and NATO. I think we need to, again, get more serious on the sanctions. We have to go straight after Putin as well, and Lavrov and some of the people, not just the oligarchs or the elite. We have to go straight at them. And I think also we have to think about this in terms of the Russian population. We have to do what we can to inform them about the costs of this, about what this is doing to their country. We also have to inform them. That's a covert action campaign, right? That's influencing the hearts and minds, giving them more information, because Putin is trying to limit that. So we have to do what we can within Russia to try to convince people that he has made a very serious mistake here. And look, he's one of the most richest, one of the wealthiest people in the world. So I think we should also be releasing information to the Russian population about how that happened. You know, how did your leader become one of the wealthiest people in the world? It wasn't through hard work. It was through corruption. So let's get that out there as well, and put a spotlight on Putin.
All right, and Michael, just for more clarity on this, like you mentioned, it is going to be harder now to empower the Ukrainian army. So do you think the West has had intelligence on this for quite some time now? Do you think there should have been a contingency plan in place?
Well, I think we should have done two primary things. We should have been providing more hardware, military hardware, to the Ukraine over the past few years. I mean, this was not just something we should have been doing over the previous year. But we should have been more serious about providing them with the support, knowing that they were a building democracy in the shadow of an egotistical dictator who saw them as a threat to his power. And I think also in the U.S. in particular, we should not have changed our energy policies. And we should have understood that keeping oil at $25 or $30 a barrel was in our national security interests and in the West's national security interests, because it prevents Putin from filling his coffers with cash and engaging in this sort of military adventurism.
All right, Michael Baker, thank you so much for joining us with your insight on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.